Well, welcome everyone. I'm RT Ryback from the Minneapolis Foundation. We want to welcome you to a birthday party, I guess you could call it. It's 5 years of Invest Minneapolis. I don't know what you do for a fund like this as a birthday party, what you burn, but hopefully not dollar bills. We're just really happy to have you here today. And with what I think is really one of the incredibly exciting initiatives we have at the Minneapolis Foundation that really has partnered with so many great people in the community. Our leader throughout all of this has been Jean Adams. Jean, you want to give us a wave? Who is our Chief Operating Officer. And this has been a real labor of love of many people within the organization, including a cross-disciplinary team that works on it, because it's really a way to disrupt the thinking of how a traditional foundation leverages money. It's a way that we've been able to use to really give a lift to some great strategies you'll hear about in just a couple minutes. So I'm going to get out of the way and let the others take over. And Jean will give you some description. But I do just want to say that some of the people on this panel are some of the best practitioners doing work out in the community. Kate Barr, who's been a great longtime friend and partner of the foundation. Renee Dozman, who's been a real pal of mine with the Midtown Global Market, which I was just at yesterday, and has been really on the front line of laying out an incredibly exciting plan for the market going forward. Peter McLaughlin, who I've done work with for, I don't know, since the Pleistocene era or something, but is doing just a great job at LISC. And of course, Joanne Stately, who I've worked with in many different ways, including right now, we're working together on a building with the Phillips Foundation on West Broadway. So you have a great panel to do it. And I want to turn it over to our fearless leader on this whole initiative, Jean Adams.
Thanks, RT. So yes, I am the Chief Operating Officer and Senior Vice President of Strategy at the Minneapolis Foundation. And I agree, this is one of the most exciting things I have been involved with, at least at the Minneapolis Foundation, and have had the pleasure of working with so many of these folks. And just want to thank everybody for being here today and taking some time out to be with us to really celebrate this 5 years and talk about, what impact we've had and where we're going next. So thank you to all of you who have invested in the program, whether it was 5 years ago or 2 months ago. Thank you for being a part of that. And for those of you who are thinking about investing in this program, using part of your funds, of your donor advised fund, or if you have a private foundation, it's a way to test this out, being on this call, hear about the impact that we're making and see if it might be a good fit for you. And I know we've got some of our philanthropic advisors on the call too. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, make sure to talk with them more about it. So RT did mention our cross-disciplinary team, and I just want to introduce those folks. I don't think we'll be able to see their faces or all of their faces, but I want to at least mention their names and their roles in this team, because we have had this really wonderful team behind the scenes who are looking for investments, who are evaluating the investments, who are promoting the investments. And it's really been a really cool, if you will, and unique thing that we've got going at the foundation. So Joanne Stately and Patrice Relaford, you can both wave. You'll hear more from Joanne in a little bit. But those are our community impact directors who are responsible for bringing the ideas, the loans to this committee to review. They are really in great partnership, long-term partnership with our CDFI partners and other folks on the ground. And they bring those ideas and the needs that the community has to the team. And then we've got Greg Wenz and Karen Flores. Greg is our CFO. Karen Flores is our manager of investments. So once that idea comes in, then they really look at the financial aspects of the deal, right? Is this going to work for our investors in the Minneapolis Foundation? Is it going to work in terms of a diversified portfolio that we're trying to create? So they're really giving that a close look. We also have Sarah Lamaji, who is our marketing and communications director, representative, who's part of this team, who does a fabulous job in thinking about how to tell this story. She is also on this cross-disciplinary team. And then last but not least, we've got Bill Sternberg, who is not, he was supposed to be doing this part today, but he's been called away. His mother is very ill, so we're sending our prayers and our thoughts to him. But he's really been a tremendous asset to this team as well. So, so thank you again for all of you being here. So 5 years ago, it's amazing. 5 years ago, we started down this journey. The Minneapolis Foundation had some history of making program-related investments or loans into community development financing institutions and other organizations in the community. But what we wanted to do that was different was to partner with our donor advisors or our fund holders. We wanted to bring our assets together to create this unique loan fund that was a collaboration between the foundation and donor advisors, and get that money out there deployed into the community on the ground where we knew it was really going to change lives. And so we decided rather than create our own expertise in-house, we had phenomenal partners out there that especially Patrice and Joanne had worked with for years and years and years, who we had the utmost trust in to know what was going on in the community, how to invest in the community, and again, really get to those targeted outcomes that would change lives. So we created this this portfolio that all of you have invested in or are thinking of investing in, and it will evolve over time. It's an evergreen fund. So as the community's needs change, we too can change to meet the needs of the community. So that's a really neat part of this program. For those of you who maybe aren't invested in this program and want to know a little bit more about how this works, I've kind of alluded to this, but we've brought our money together, those who want to invest from donor advised funds, bring that together. We look for opportunities out there in CDFIs. The CDFIs, the community development financing institutions, that is, they deploy the capital out into the community on the ground. They are most proximate with the work. They know how to get this money out and how to get really the best outcomes and what we're looking for. And then over time, we've got some loans that come due in a few years, all the way to I think our longest term loan is about 12 or 13 years in housing. Those assets then come back with interest on your principal as well as a return of principal. And to date, I'm really excited that this program, all of our loans are performing. We have 100% performance, everyone in good standing. We have 66 donor advisors who have participated in this program to date. And right now we have $6 million deployed. We're hoping that number keeps going up with redeployment, reinvestment of capital, so that we can keep recycling, as I like to say, those dollars out there in the community to continue to make a difference. So you're probably getting sick of me talking. You want to see what the real impact has been and how we've been able to work with these CDFIs and with businesses and nonprofits in the community to make those investments and make those outcomes. So we're going to hear from some of those folks through a video. And then after that video, we'll have a panel discussion where you can use the Q&A function of Zoom to ask some questions of our group. So Dario, do you want to go ahead and roll that video?
Oh, coming right up. Thank you.
My name is Perla Mayo, and I'm the Director of Lending of Neighborhood Development Center. And the thing I do, I help entrepreneurs to get access to capital.
My name is Lachelle Cunningham. I have many roles at the Neighborhood Development Center.
The relation that we have with Bipod Business is a long-term relation. We know that every loan that we do is a high-risk loan. And the only way that we are going to help entrepreneurs to kind of make it is a long-term relation. A long-term relation with a technical assistant. We provide a lot of accounting, marketing, legal assistance. So in order to pay for NDC staff and NDC consultants, we need support of foundations.
The needs of the community and business owners being impacted by the pandemic and the uprising from the murder of George Floyd, all of that has really called people to do things differently ultimately. It's caused communities to come together and it's called a lot of people to really step up and be genuine about how they support the community.
Hello, my name is Manny Gonzalez. My business is Manny's Tortas. We still need the financial support because we still know out of the woods. Not only the technical support, legal support, marketing support. Let the business know that you have somebody behind you that is gonna back you up and help you. Then we're not alone. This is a team. Thanks to the Minneapolis Foundation, then get money through NDC so they can help a small business just to keep going, just keep the dream on,
My name is Danzo. I have a business in town sushi during pandemic. Without helping, we can survive. We can do anything without NDC, without using a local business, local non-profit organization. They helping a lot for us that time.
Don't feel like you're alone, because that's what I learned. Then when everything just happened, like we closed and everything, you feel alone. You feel like now what I'm gonna do. Think about that. There's always help out there, and there's partnerships. Then they want your business be successful, and that's one of the things that keep this economy growing and keep the city going.
Thank you so much, Invest Minneapolis Foundation, for the 5-year support. So without you, we couldn't provide, financing to startups and businesses in our target neighborhood, but also we couldn't provide technical assistance. As I mentioned, the relation that we have with our clients is a long-term relation, and always we need to be next to the entrepreneur when they have difficult times, like, the last year. So thank you to the support we can provide those services. Without you, we cannot do it.
I really want to thank the Invest Minneapolis Fund for all of their investment in the work that we're doing in the community in the Twin Cities. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here. I want to say all help to and for getting here to me. So I want to say my language also. ကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်ခုလိုဒီနေရာမျိုးမှာပြောခွင့်ရတဲ့အတွက်ကျွန်တော်အနေနဲ့ရောကျွန်တော်ဒီ intern sushi အနေနဲ့ရောဒီက non profit organization တို့ကျွန်တော်တို့အများကြီးကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်
I like to take NDC for all their support and the Minneapolis Invest Fund, la Fundación de Inversión de Minneapolis, en español, para que la gente latina lo sepa. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's amazing. A few of us got kind of teary-eyed the first time we saw that video. And the reason is because it's not just, you've seen the list of investments that your dollars have gone to support, but what's behind each one of those investments? It's the Community Development Financing Institution. We're helping them build their capacity, build their or broaden their reach. We're helping those business owners, those nonprofits, reach the community. It's about employment. It's about communities of color. It's about being there, during this pandemic, being able to offer jobs, offer food, offer, fill in the blank into the community. So I hope when you see that list of investments, you see the stories that go in behind that. So that's what we really want to hear about next. And we've got no better person to moderate this conversation and to provide her own stories as Kate Barr, excuse me. Kate runs, she's the president and CEO of the Propel Nonprofits. Within Propel Nonprofits, there is the Nonprofits Assistance Fund that makes loans specifically to nonprofits, but she also has a banking background and has also made lots of loans to businesses and knows that sector very well as well. So like I said, no better person than Kate Barr to lead us through this next discussion. So Kate, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jean, and thank you, everyone. I'm so thrilled to have the panel here and to be here with the Minneapolis Foundation to talk about InvestMPLS and how important this work is. You know, Jean, a couple things that you said, I just want to kind of frame a little bit about why this is so important. And some of the things you said early in your framing of the fund, you talked about recycling dollars, you talked about leveraging dollars, you talked about kind of working with these partners in the community. And if you just think about capital being different from donations and grants, which are very important, of course, in community, but capital is so important to the way wealth is built, the way neighborhoods are strengthened, the way housing gets developed. And for most of us, and if we own a business or if we're involved in a business, when we think about capital, we think about banks, we think about personal wealth, we think about investment companies, and there is a whole part of the community that doesn't have access to that kind of capital. And the partners that we're talking about here and the leveraging of funds through the InvestMPLS fund are to those organizations. So rather than getting lost in the alphabet soup here, community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, are a form of a way to get capital into a community. And it is, you know, the moniker comes from a federal fund that's an important supporter of the work. But the essence of it is, as Jean said, relationships in community with people who are proximate to community, in community, understand that community, often really are of that community, who have access to capital, and then are able to add value with other kinds of supports and resources, which might be what Perla described as technical assistance, and we can talk a little bit about what that is, but additional supports. Manny talked about legal and marketing support, so all of that, as well as just the know-how of how to do this. Some of the loans that are made by these partner CDFIs are $10,000 and $15,000, as well as ones that I'm sure Peter can talk about that might be much larger for a housing project, and that we do at Propel Nonprofits for charter schools or for arts organizations or for human service. So, but this special relationship that that CDFIs are able to have with the Minneapolis Foundation and with supporters of the fund is how we all can leverage and recycle those dollars. So I think it's just helpful to kind of frame this kind of unique partnership and this unique kind of institution. So I'm thrilled to be joined here by our two panelists representing important CDFI partners in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Renee Dossman from Neighborhood Development Center, Peter McLaughlin from Twin Cities LISC, or Local Initiative Support Corporation. And I'm going to start by just asking each of you to give I'm going to ask you to stick it to 1 minute description of what you do and how you get capital community and who you work with. So Renee, I'm going to start with you.
Hello. So just grateful to be here today. Thank you so much. Thanks, Kate. So Renee Dossman, president of the Neighborhood Development Center. We are a CDFI nonprofit that specializes, supports entrepreneurs of color from the low to lowest income. 86% are BIPOC, 81% are low to lowest income. We do training, we do the technical assistance, the lending, and then we have real estate. Our largest incubator is the Midtown Global Market, which is where I am right now.
Thanks, Renee. Peter. Yeah, perfect. Peter. Oh, we can't hear you, Peter.
I'm going to turn my video off. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Oh,
much
yes.
better. Great, you go.
Okay.
Oh,
Much
yes.
better. Great, you go.
Okay. I've got some very unstable Wi-Fi here. I was assured that there was going to be good Wi-Fi. So I'm out in the Sierras on our vacation. But so what LISC does, we're a CDFI. Kate did a great explanation of CDFIs. I boil it down to, we try to provide access to capital for people, places, and projects that can't get adequate access with the normal financing mechanisms. So that's what we do. We provide access to that capital. We provide vehicles for investment for the public sector, for the private sector, and for nonprofits like the Minneapolis Invest to make this, to go to projects that are going to advance community. And so we're a vehicle for moving that capital, and we then provide technical assistance to surround the recipients of those loans in many cases, and to build the capacity of those organizations and communities as well.
Thanks, Peter. That's great. And I think it's interesting to also think about that we have kind of an ecosystem of CDFIs and community lenders in the Twin Cities that really strengthens all of us. And so while Renee is working with small businesses and LISC is working often with whole neighborhoods, and we're all leveraging off of each other. We work with nonprofits, and we're all supporting and referring, lots of referrals back and forth to each other, and how that all works and understanding that. Renee, I'm going to ask you a question, but I also want to tell the people who are participating, at the bottom of your screen is a Q&A that you can click on. And if questions come up as you're listening to our panelists, drop in your questions there, and then we will be able to track them and respond to them kind of when we have a moment to pause. So Renee, I'm going to ask you particularly, NDC has always worked, as you say, with those Black, Indigenous, and people of color owned businesses and entrepreneurs. And so there are some recurring all the time, the entrepreneurs we saw in the video. And then this last year, of course, we've had multiple crises that have exacerbated a lot of that, elevated. What are those most critical needs in terms of that, both capital and the other supports?
Absolutely. So NDC has been around for 28 years. So we've definitely seen a lot. I'd say the one thing that I want to remind people is not to forget them. Don't forget. They need your support. They need you to shop. They need you to buy their services. That's like the most critical. I'm here at the market now, and we're doing our best, like RT commented, to get people into the market, but we need people to continue to support them and not to forget about how important these businesses are in the community. Being intentional about supporting them is needed. I'd say the other thing that's needed that's a little off, might be potentially, but is creativity and innovation and your ingenuity. Like this fund is all of those things. So how can we do more of that? Because they need all of those things to survive. Obviously, clearly, as we're here, we're talking about access to capital, definitely need that. But not only that, like low interest capital, the grants that can also go along with some of that capital, as well as the technical assistance that we've talked about. But I want to talk a little bit about that we need even more specialized technical assistance, because one of the trends that we're seeing with our entrepreneurs is they now want to own their own buildings. They want to own the real estate. And so in order to do that, like NDC, we're like, okay, so we need some help figuring out and understanding how to structure those deals as well. So access to even more specialized technical assistance, I think, is needed right now. Technology is key. So we started this program called the Tech Pack at NDC, where we recognize that a lot of our entrepreneurs didn't have websites, weren't prepared when everything happened, when COVID happened and the unrest. They didn't have social media. So we need access to that kind of innovation and technology for our entrepreneurs, for them to be successful. And then the last point that I want to make that has come to our attention is their mental wellness. That is important. I had an interaction with an entrepreneur, and it just left me shook. Like, I was like, we need to do something. We can't just focus on the business. That's important. But if you're not right from a mental wellness perspective, nothing works. And so we started a program called Mindset Reset, pairing our entrepreneurs with culturally specific therapists and coaches and things that they need. Because if you think about it, in most communities, and especially for entrepreneurs, they don't have the money to pay for these things. So some of these are obviously, most people will know, but there's a couple that I wanted to leave with you just to think about. And the main one is go shop BIPOC entrepreneurs, please.
Well, if you could deliver a tour test to me, please, I would be happy to give my order right this second.
That is why I'm here. After
Or-
that
or
video,
some-
I'm like,
or
I am
some
going to
sushi.
get me a
Yes,
tour.
exactly. Yeah. So Peter, thank you, Renee. Peter, I'm going to turn to you and ask you, I gave the quick snapshot of what a CDFI is, but you've had long relationships in the community around community development. How do you see CDFIs really contributing to the economic health of the Twin Cities, and in particular to women and BIPOC-owned businesses? How do you see that?
Well, the essence of CDFIs, as I said earlier, was to try to provide access for people, places, and projects that can't get access to capital through the normal channels, either because the normal channels are more risk averse or because the interest rate is too high. And so our job is to make sure that capital is there and available for the entrepreneurs who are out there, for the developers who are out there. And so we try to amass that capital. We try to build relationships on the ground with the community organizations like NDC. We just did a loan with NDC to allow them to acquire a property. And so we have to have those relationships on the ground, solid relationships on the ground. And then we need to bring the other resources, the supplemental resources beyond just the capital, the affordable capital that's willing to take the risks involved in community projects. But there's also there's a capital gap in time, an equity gap in some circumstances. And so we need to help to raise that money with our community partners. And then there is this technical assistance. These projects are getting more complicated, particularly if ownership is involved. You know that, Kate. And so that the technical assistance, it's either we provide that kind of coaching, or we find reliable sources of that kind of coaching, whether it be an engineering firm to deal with a special problem in the building that they've just discovered, or it's in some cases it has to do with architectural work or permits and the like. And so we need to help to amass all of those kinds of services that are essential for any kind of developer. And one of the problems with emerging developers of color is they don't have family wealth. And we know that that's a product of a history of lack of home ownership and denial of access to the mechanisms for home ownership. And so their budgets are tighter. They don't have as much liquidity. And so that when the moment comes, when you got to come up with $25,000 for that one study that's going to be necessary to do the engineering work, we've got to find a way to get that study done with our partner organizations. Otherwise, the projects will stall out because they just don't have the margins. They just don't have the extra room, the extra liquidity that allows them to go forward. And so it's important to look at the whole development, not just the capital side, but the technical sides of it. And the comments about the personal side of it as well is important. You have to know who your partner is and make sure that they stay strong.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And I'm gonna add just the experience that we've had at Propel Nonprofits as the lender to nonprofits. But my guess is that both of you could echo it. Is this last 15 months has really called on all of us to develop some new skills and some new tools to really develop, because the problems may be similar, but they are also different and new. Some of them around things like the Paycheck Protection Program, or around things like when the city and the state say you can't go to a retailer, what happens to all the retailers? I think that one of your entrepreneurs addressed that. And so could you maybe just share a little bit about what are some of the things that you did in the last year that were kind of new for you, that you did in terms of this support for these businesses?
Yeah, Yes, I could take that one first. I mentioned a couple of them. We started this Tech Pack program because we realized our entrepreneurs not many of them didn't have websites or social media, so we knew that they needed technical support from that perspective. We've actually been partnering with the Lake Street Council on a program called Money Matters, because the financial education and the financial piece. And so for some of the entrepreneurs that receive funding for them, they said, we need help with our finances. Great that you're giving us this money. Wonderful, we need that, but we need something else too. So we started that. And then I mentioned the mental health mindset reset program, but we also started an emergency grant program at NDC because we recognized that there were some entrepreneurs that were not able to access the PPP. Remember that first round went like that. They couldn't get that, and then there was state and local and all these things, and they just were left out. So we started that program, and then we've also started a new loan program that's called Reposition Your Business, that if you're looking to kind of maybe add a deck or add outside seating or do something different to your business, specifically centered around that. But yeah, we had to jump in and do some things really quickly to address the needs that were there.
No, thanks. Yeah.
So I just add, we did not participate in the PPP program in round one, and we saw what happened. That a lot of the less experienced businesses and nonprofits didn't participate. So we did. Our national list office raised the liquidity that we needed to participate in the second round, and we provided loans, PPP loans here in the Twin Cities. I was very proud that we helped 3 important Black institutions with those loans that weren't able to get the loans the first time. Sabathani Community Center, the Spokesman Recorder newspaper, which was the traditional legacy Black newspaper in the Twin Cities, and then the Wellness Center. Those are just 3 of the loans that we provided, but those are 3 key Black institutions that we were able to provide loans to. We also, our national office and locally, we raised money for grants to small businesses and nonprofits to allow them to get over the hump in terms of operating losses that they were suffering. And so we tried to target those grants into. We have placemaking districts on West Broadway, East Lake, East 38th, and Franklin Avenue in Minneapolis, and then along University Avenue and up on East 7th in St. Paul. And we tried to funnel the money that we were receiving from our national office and locally into businesses and nonprofits in those geographies, because they were particularly hard hit by COVID, because there was a concentration of small businesses, small BIPOC businesses, and because of the destruction that occurred during the uprising, they were particularly vulnerable. And so we tried to do that as well. Finally, we have just launched, we're calling it our Developers of Color Initiative. We have 12 developers of color who are emerging developers, and our goal is to provide them with the supports that they need to get their projects completed, but also to help when they're done with that project, to have them emerge as a cadre of new developers in the Twin Cities market, so that we're actually trying to change the composition of who's doing development. That's a long-term goal. That's going to help to change the long-term trajectory of BIPOC communities in terms of wealth building, ownership of properties, and really we see that as, rebuilding better. That's going to lead to a real transformative change. But that's something that we're really proud of. We're just starting that initiative now, and we were able to raise some additional funds to help in that project. We originally were going to do six partners, and we're now up to 12 in this first cadre, and the hope is to have another cadre once this first one's completed. But that, in terms of long-term transformative change, we think that's a critical step that goes beyond just the emergency assistance that was necessary because of COVID and the uprising. This is about the future and building a stronger future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. And thank you for that. And both of you, I think, just really demonstrated how one of the things that the organizations like yours and the one where I work, where we're so close to the community, is that we hear what's happening and then we can nimbly respond as quickly as we can, because the world is different. I mean, we have a similar thing called Recovery Capital that's also kind of the repositioning for nonprofits, same sort of idea. So, well, I'm going to ask one more question to our panel, including Joanne, and then we're going to turn to the Q&A. So if you have questions, be sure and type them into that Q&A box down there. But Renee and Peter and then Joanne, kind of similar. How can foundations and individuals help support your organization's efforts to strengthen BIPOC businesses? And Joanne, after Renee and Peter respond quickly, what role does the Minneapolis Foundation play here, and how does that, why does this matter? So, Renee, why don't you just say, how can we can shop, we can go all eat at the markets and buy stuff, but how else can we help?
It's opportunities like this to listen and to partner. I mean, I honestly am just so grateful for the Minneapolis Foundation. I want to be fully transparent and say I don't think the market would be standing if it wasn't for the support of this foundation, and RT and Joanne and the meetings and just keeping us going. But I think about, I spent many years, as you know, Kate, in corporate America, right? And so I come from that perspective. Like in corporate America, like you pay people, you develop them, you don't ask them to do things that are like with not paying them well, with not developing them, just do all this work. And so I think for the nonprofit space, that's kind of it. Like when you get funding, you don't get funding for the development of your team or the support of your team. It's for the mission, and that's important, but your team needs these resources as well. And so I think we need to start thinking more broadly about how can we support these teams. So I'm currently in a program where I'm getting some capacity building training, and it's wonderful. And we need to do more of that. And I want to share more of that with my team. So I think that's an opportunity. And then I think I would love for people to think of NDC first, right? Like think of us when you want to do innovation. I love innovating. I love design thinking. Why do we have to boil the ocean? Why can't we test something? Like this concept that we're talking about now, this Invest Minneapolis is innovative. And so I love that. I mentioned a little bit about the capacity building. I want to get NDC to sustainability. That's where we want to go. So how can we talk about partner to get to sustainability? I love that. And just thinking more broadly about how we can come together and share ideas and support each other. But I have to say that the support of this foundation and I saw one of the questions in the chat about some of the businesses highlighted in that video. In Town Sushi and Manny's Torters are recipients of this fund. And so us coming together in that way, you can see the impact that you've made. So those are just a few of the ideas I had about that, but I am grateful, don't get me wrong, but I think we can all do better together.
Always. Peter, how can individuals and foundations help LISC do your work?
Well, I think it's helping LISC and helping the whole community go forward is what I'd like to talk about. And we're a source of capital, usable capital. And I firmly believe, and I come from a long history in the public sector, that the combination of traditional philanthropic funds and public sector funds that combination is not going to be sufficient to get to the kind of transformation in our community to a just and equitable community that we aspire to right now. We're going to have to mobilize other sources of capital. I mean, the foundation, Minneapolis Foundation, does a great job with its grants. Public sector is more active now than it's been in a generation, arguably. But we need to tap into the larger sources of capital that are available. And my experience in the last year has been that it's a moment of reawakening. I believe that. I think that the corporations and foundations are looking at things in different ways.
Yes.
And frankly, the main corpus, the investments of those, their main corpus of funds as a corporation or as a foundation, to try to find ways that are smart for your investment, but also good for the community, and trying to stretch the notion of what is a reasonable investment of the core resource, the core capital that you have available as a major institution. To me, that's how we get to a scale that will work to close the racial gaps that we know exist around the country and are especially large here in the Twin Cities. And that's really, I think, what the challenge is. It's important to be experimenting, but we've got to bring these changes to scale. And if we're going to make a true transformation of our society to a more racial justice. Now, scale is a funny thing. And there's been a lot of aversion to scale. I've been in a few meetings where I've brought up scale and people said, I'm not sure about that. And there's a reason for that. When you talk scale in the past, or if you talk leverage in the past, trying to leverage funds, capital, then all of a sudden BIPOC communities didn't participate in those deals. And so what's important, and so there's been an aversion in BIPOC communities to talk about scale. But the fact, I believe we need to do both. We need to make sure that we are engaging with and empowering BIPOC communities and getting to scale in those communities. That's the only way we're going to really close the gaps. But that takes work. That takes extra work to make sure that we're providing that while we're making the investments, we're also building the capacities of BIPOC organizations in the BIPOC communities. And that's the trick there. It's kind of walking and chewing gum at the same time. And that's what we've got to figure out how to do on a consistent basis.
Yeah, the phrase I've gotten to love this year is "we can do hard things."
Yes.
Yeah. Joanne, what about the foundation? How does the Minneapolis Foundation, what role does the Minneapolis Foundation in strengthen this? The InvestMPLS fund is important, but the foundation does so much more. So what does the foundation do, and why does this matter?
Well, to kind of go off of what you just said, the Minneapolis Foundation does hard things. We don't do the easy stuff. So I think that's a very critical role that we play as a community foundation. And our role, of course, is to be in relationship with the community. And in this particular area of interest, when we're talking and working with CDFIs, the goal is how do we support BIPOC businesses? This is very much, as has been said, and Peter said this very well, we want to address what's happening with our racial and economic gaps. And this is an opportunity for us to think about how we can do this differently than perhaps we've done it in the past, for us to do the hard stuff and for us to be willing to take the risks. Traditionally people think about foundations and just doing grants. And that's just one of the assets that we have that we can bring to the issues that have already been identified. I noticed that there was a question asking about how did this all happen? And Jean talked about this in the very beginning, that we were doing a number of small type of adventures into doing loans or providing guarantees. And most of those were with Kate Barr, actually. And also trying to support what Kate Barr is doing with Propel. But when it came to a really major public investment of dollars that was related to the new stadium, we saw this as an opportunity to really ensure that BIPOC businesses and construction were going to be part of that wealth opportunity by creating jobs and having something that was going to be consistent over that 3-year period. And so we decided to create a $1 million loan fund and worked with an intermediary. It was META at that point, just to kind of test the interest of our donors at that point. This was something that was going to be very time specific, low interest loans that we expected to turn over during that 3-year time period. but it was also going to create jobs. In creating those jobs, it was also going to tie into some of our other activities in supporting job development, job creation, and particularly for people in the trades. So we just saw it as an absolute win-win for the public, for our communities, and for those individual businesses. All there too, all loans performed, people were hired, the stadium exceeded all its goals, and we got to be just a small part of that in testing out this concept of, should we do this in a more deliberate way and going forward? So the question was, what was the genesis? That was kind of the genesis to really become more formalized and create this fund, as Jean said, and to make this an evergreen fund that could be responsive, because certainly the stadium was a responsive investment at that time. I think also as a foundation, our role is not to have the answers, but to find what community has as the solutions. And we have been in relationship with Blisk and with NDC and with Cape Bar for many, many, many years. So there is this trust relationship that we have. We do understand kind of our roles and what our opportunities are. And I can't even count the number of times that I've had to be on the phone and talk to Kate or talk to NDC, particularly even Peter, and saying, this is a tough case. Or they'll call me and say, this is going to be a tough case, but we need to invest in it. How can we do it? And it's my role in representing the foundation to listen and be responsive and see, where can we do this together? We're not looking for all successes. We know that the creation of small businesses have a high rate of not being successful. But I place the money and my bet on these CDFIs and the work that they do to really do everything to make sure that they're going to have a higher success rate with any entity, any group, any individual business that they come into contact with. So we use our availability of capital. We use what we have internally as our expertise, but we really do rely on all that expertise and that ground knowledge that is out there that's represented by the CDFIs that Kate alluded to. We have 3 strong ones here today, but we have many more in the community that all kind of interface together and bring their talents, bring their expertise and skills at various times and on some very complex situations and issues. We heard about the response to COVID. That was such a critical time. What did that have to do with us in the InvestMPLS Fund? We are investors in those CDFIs. We want those CDFIs to be successful. We want those loans to continue to be successful. But we also had to invest through our grant making to make sure that they did have the dollars and the additional capacity to meet these challenges. So it wasn't necessarily about the loan. It was about the situation, how it needed to be addressed, because it was essential to the vitality and what things are going to look like going forward.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you described all of that, Joanne, because first of all, I remember some of those phone calls, like, we have to do this. This is important. And I think it is helpful, as Peter was talking about the role of the private sector and the public sector and CDFIs and foundations, that one of the things that CDFIs are well positioned to do is to take a different kind of risk with capital. I sometimes am hesitant to say we make high risk loans because of course we do, but it's the relationships, the technical assistance, the expertise, all of that additional support that actually makes that risk good risk. Yes. But we're leveraging other money. So, at Propel, we're working with nonprofits, and we have worked particularly with InvestMPLS around some charter schools where there may be a building that cost $15 million and a bank was in there and a city was in there. And then Propel came in with the piece that finished the pie and was essentially the one that wasn't secured. So we took some additional risk, but because of all those relationships, and the foundation's been really important in pulling those relationships together. And I want to give you credit for that because it's one of the kinds of capital that you have too.
Could I just add to that?
Please.
Kate? And that is, when we try to bring this additional capital into play in community, one of the jobs that you have as Propel, we have at Lisk, and others have, is to structure some pretty complicated deals. to make sure that the risk is at a tolerable level to bring the money in. And so, and sometimes there are stacks of capital, and the different layers of the stack have different levels of risk. And so these deals are not simple, and we need the capacity in the community to put those together. And we try to do that. And we try to, because we want our investors to get their money back. And so, and we're committed to that, but we also want to be making loans that would not otherwise be made. So we have to structure these things in complicated ways, and we're careful about it.
Yep. So I'm going to turn to the Q&A now, because we do only have a little bit of time left. So one of the questions here, and I'm going to direct it to Jean Adams, because I think you're going to know the answer, is if a donor advised fund invests, is there an opportunity to withdraw funds so that they can then be used for a different kind of grant or different kind of purpose?
Yes. So when donor advised funds invest in this portfolio, it is a specific time period. So you invest in 5 years, you're getting interest back annually, you get your principal back at the end of that 5 years. That goes into your donor advised fund. You are able then to use that charitable capital either for grants or for reinvestment into this fund, which, by the way, hopefully you've heard how much impact this fund is having, and how having those dollars in this fund ready to deploy has really been helpful over the past several years, but including this past year. So just being able to have those assets in that pool to deploy as needed, just really critical to the success of this program. So yes, you get your assets back, Tad, in your donor advised fund, unless you choose to invest in this program.
Thanks, Jean. That's really helpful to understand that. So Joanne, I'm going to ask you a question that's here in the Q&A around, could you provide some more kind of description or any more information on the businesses that are recipients of this capital, and particular some interest in the kind of the number of jobs created, the wages paid. Do you have more of that kind of information that you can share?
Yes, we do. And specifically, we built that in when we did the first loan, again, as it was related to the stadium. And again, those are mostly construction positions, and those are very well paying. We usually say we want livable wage, full-time jobs that are related to the projects. And as the individuals that are here, like Renee and Peter, they know that as part of the loans that we have with them, we ask again, how many loans have been made, who are the businesses, types of businesses, how many jobs have been created, and trying to get an idea of what those wages that are being paid by those jobs. So we rely on that information to come from our investment partners. We're not interested in low-paying jobs. Definitely not in that. And certainly would like everything to be more than, $24, $25 an hour, probably at the low level, and then goes up from there to $45 an hour or more in construction and IT, if you get into IT particularly.
Thanks, Joanne. That's great. We have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to turn it back to, I think, Jean and Joanne to kind of wrap us up here.
Well, thanks, Kate.
Oh, you got muted.
All right, there we go. Thank you, Kate. Thanks for moderating that panel. Really helpful. And I wonder if we might be able to provide a little more detail, maybe in follow-up, around some of the numbers that we have around jobs and wages and that kind of thing. So let's take a look at that and see and provide that back to those who have participated in this call. So just finally, Joanne and I wanted to again thank everybody for being here. Thank you for the interest in this fund. Thank you for those of you who have been investors for all 5 years. as we move forward, you can tell there's a whole lot of energy behind this strategy. We really want to keep it alive and well, so that our responsiveness to the community needs can evolve, right? That's what we're doing in our grant making. We also want to do that in our investing. And so we really hope that those of you who are considering this, as I said in the beginning, talk with your philanthropic advisor and see if this is a fit for your fund, if this has captivated your interest. And also for those of you who are in this fund, when you have that opportunity, when that loan comes due or is paid back, I should say, think about reinvesting in this fund. It really is a unique thing that is going on here in the Minneapolis Foundation. As I talk to my colleagues in other community foundations, they're not doing this kind of a partnership with their donors. They might be doing one-offs, they might be doing things on their own. There's very little of this kind of a partnership. So we're really proud of it and proud of what we've been able to do by collaborating together. Joanne, do you want to add to that?
Well, of course, I'm all for people reinvesting. As I think about who the groups are and knowing who some of the businesses that have benefited from this fund, it's very critical for that ongoing support. But as well as new people and wanting to learn more about this fund, we have 2 opportunities for investment. And so the next opportunity is actually coming up in July. And so that's why our philanthropic advisors are going to be available to those that currently have their investments in the Invest Minneapolis Fund, and for those who want to learn perhaps a little more. But again, we have 2 opportunities a year. It's based on what we raise and what we're able to give out. So we really hope this has really piqued your interest, and hope you'll tell others about this as well. And I do just want to reemphasize what a little bit, I think, of the comments that Jean made. We are doing something that is very kind of unusual in philanthropy for community foundations. So people are looking to us to help them figure this out with how we've been able to work so well with alignment with our donors. So you are important in this equation, and this couldn't be done, without you. And just want to emphasize that again. And I think as the Invest Minneapolis video gave their thank yous, I'd like to give our thank yous on behalf of the foundation, in particular committee, and our relationships with our CDFIs to say thank you once again. And we'll remind you that there will be a survey that you'll be receiving where you can provide some additional feedback that we certainly will use and we take and will consider as we continue to build this fund. So with that, I'll say thank you so much.